Hi, my name is Sandra WICK. I'm the crop production agent with the Postrock District of K-State Research and Extension. Well, I thought I'd do another follow-up episode about soils. If you remember when we were out here previously, I did a segment on soil health, and one of the indicators of soil health was organic matter. One of the ways to figure out the level of organic matter in your soil is to soil test. So I'd like to share with you a little bit about soil testing and the proper methods for soil testing. Okay, so let's start out with equipment, because it's always important that you have the right equipment before you get out in the field. So I have a couple probes, and most of our extension offices do have some probes and all this equipment that you can check out and borrow. So the first probe here is a 12-inch probe, and it has a step on here, and you're going to see how this can be very helpful for you. Here's another probe that's very similar, however it doesn't have a step, and it's about a 4-foot probe. And if you notice, it's completely all the way through, and there's a hole on this end and there's a hole on the other end. And so if you treat this, and I'll tell you what you can do to treat it with, you simply, after you collect the core, you simply dump it into the bucket and it should fall in the bucket for you. You also need a screwdriver, and that will come in handy with this particular probe, since this top part up here is not open, and this one you would have to dig that soil out. What we talked about on treating these is your best friend WD-40. This will not interfere with any of the soil or any of the soil tests, so be sure you put this in your toolbox and carry this with you when you have to do a soil test, is WD-40. Another type of soil testing system that we have here in the Postrock District is called a drill bucket system. Pretty simple system. We do have a small drill, and we have a 12-inch bit, and then we have a 24-inch bit, and we have batteries that come with this. And the bucket that goes with this has a hole in the bottom of it, and I will show you how you demonstrate this. And the drill bit just goes simply in that hole, and then you reverse it, and then the soil goes in the bucket. So that's one other system. You also need some soil testing bags, and you can get these from the extension office. Another important component is buckets, especially if you're getting two different soil depths. So I've labeled this one surface, and then I have another bucket, and we're going to label that subsoil, so you don't get either of those samples mixed up. Then the last thing is a soil input sheet that you can also either get online or from the extension office. So now let's go into simply how to take those soil tests. The most important thing to remember is different soil depths and when you soil sample. How that's divided is by what your nutrient is. So basically there are two different groups of nutrients that the nutrients fit into. The first one is your mobile nutrients. What that simply means is those nutrients will move very readily up and down that soil profile. These nutrients include such things as nitrogen, which seems to be the most limiting nutrient, or that you need the most of. Chloride's another one, and sulfur's another one. So with those, you want to take as deep a sample as you can, so up to 24 inches. The next group is called immobile nutrients, and what that simply refers to is that those nutrients don't travel very far up and down that soil profile. So those nutrients would include things like pH, phosphorus, potassium, organic matter, which we mentioned the last time, that is an indicator of soil health, and zinc. So these have a very limited movement in the soil profile. So you want to take more of a shallower depth, or 0 up to 6 inches. So remember, what we're going to do is take your WD-40, you're going to completely saturate this tube here until it's running out. Then, remember, this is the one with the step, and this is a 12-inch probe. So this is what you're going to use for your shallower or your immobile nutrients. So I'm going to grab my surface bucket here, and we're going to put some cores in here. So simply go down, see how readily that went down. Keep going down as far as you can. Remember, you only want to go about 6 inches. Twist it, pull that out, and there is your core. right here, and you can see it's already coming off from the bottom. Poke that out, and here's where your screwdriver comes in, because you're probably going to have to take this and just kind of dig that out. You can see how that simply falls out like that. That's because of your WD-40. Just go in and push it out the end, and that comes out so much easier than if you would not have some WD-40 in it. So that is your shallow sample. This is our 3-foot probe or 4-foot probe. So remember what you're going to do. Saturate the tube with WD-40. So don't be worried about using too much. It's not going to hurt anything. Now, if you're like me, you're a little bit vertically challenged. So without that step, and if you have some really dry conditions, it's going to be harder to push this probe in. You may have to go at an angle, use your sheer weight, and push that in as far as you can. Twist it, pull it out. And that's probably about 12 inches here. And then, if you can push this up, just a little bit with your finger, see how that slides? Tip that upside down. That will just go right out the top. And push it right out the top, and it goes right down in the bottom. So this probe works really good when you're trying to get a deeper profile sample. Alrighty, here's the drill system that we talked about. Remember, we have a 12-inch auger bit, and we also have a 24-inch auger bit. This is a battery-operated drill. Now with that, especially with the 24-inch depths, it takes a lot of juice in order to get those, depending on the condition of your soil. So we're going to take, this works really nicely, the 12-inch bit works really nice on your shallower or your 0 to 6. So what we're going to do here is, you remember the bucket, and it has a hole in the bottom of it. So you simply push this down here, turn on your drill, make sure it's going forward, turn that drill on, go on down the hole, and then reverse that. And then when you come back up, the soil just falls into it. All right, there's a few more things to remember when you're soil sampling. That includes how many cores you would be taking, when you would be taking that test, and where in the field you would be collecting those samples. So let's start with the number of cores. It's generally recommended to take about 15 to 20 different core samples, and that's in a 40-acre field. But it kind of depends on if your field is uniform. So if you have some places in the field that are less productive or more productive, you may want to pull some separate samples in those two specific areas. So let's move to when to take those samples. The samples can be taken really any time during the year. However, for corn and sorghum, usually it's in late winter to early spring. And for wheat, it's generally prior to planting. But the important thing to remember is to be consistent in when you're taking those samples in those particular fields for that specific crop. Lastly, where to sample in those fields. There's basically 4 different ways or philosophies on collecting these samples. The first one is a random sampling. That's really important to remember in random sampling, that your field is uniform in productivity. So if it's not, like I mentioned before, you may want to take some separate samples. The next one is being systematic, and that kind of goes along with the uniformity of the field, or to having a system in where you're collecting those samples so you get the most representative samples for that field. Okay, let's go with our third one, which is stratified sampling. What that means is that you have different, maybe management systems within that, and it could be different tillage systems or even different soil types. The last method would be composite. That's simply taking a mixing of all the different zones or different parts of that field. K-State Research and Extension has a soil testing lab, so if you like to send in your samples, just give us a call at any of our Post-Rock District offices in Beloit, Lincoln, Mankato, Osborne, or Smith Center, and we will get you set up with the soil testing bags and with the soil input sheets. Thanks for joining us here with the Post-Rock District. If you have more questions on soil testing, be sure you contact me. This has been Sandra WICK, Crop Production Agent with the Postrock District of K-State Research and Extension.